All right, so in this video, I'm gonna show you how I turned a sheet of plywood like this into a beautiful art piece. First, I'm gonna show you the wrong way that I did it, which was way too complicated, and then I'm gonna show you how I simplified it, drawing from some inspiration from my time in Japan, and made it into a beautiful art piece with a router and a sheet of plywood. So, this was a commissioned art piece. Someone reached out and they wanted an art piece for their wellness center, their spa. She had a lot of wood, some wood columns, some wood beams, a wooden barn door, and she also told me that she loved the colors that I used, the deep blues and the turquoises and the greens. So she showed me also where she wanted it, which was at the end of this hallway as you walk into her space, and she wanted something to cover this ugly gray electrical panel. I thought, the end of the space is a rectangle, so I think, and she wants people to feel welcome and calm. So I think something that is like a central circular type of composition to create kind of a portal. Portals is something that I think about a lot in a lot of my art pieces. If you look back at some of my pieces that I've made in the past and that I have available, you'll see portal type of compositions because I want to create art that draws people in, that takes you somewhere. Like this art is meant to take you somewhere. That's the beauty of abstract art, I think. Anyways, back to this piece. So, it being a commission, I made mock-ups of my idea on Photoshop, sent them to her. She loved them. So then I made another final mock-up with perfect dimensions based on the idea of building it out of 1x4s, which turns out was a terrible idea because as I started cutting them all and assembling it, the cuts weren't perfect 45 degrees. The pieces were all each a little warped a little differently, and it was just gonna be a pain in the ass to get it all to fit perfectly. So around this time, I left for a 2-week trip to Asia, to Hong Kong and Japan. And honestly, this piece was bothering me because I didn't know how I was gonna make it work. And while I was there, I decided to let it go and stop thinking about it and be present and enjoy my time. The day I got back, as I was journaling every morning, like I always do, to help clear my head, process ideas, come up with ideas, brainstorm, solve my problems, answer life's existential questions of existence, I came across the idea, why don't I totally let that go and start over with a blank sheet of plywood, use a router to cut perfectly the spots, the sections, and that way the sheet will have a consistent wood grain that's kind of uniform. It holds that uniformity, and it'll be easier for her to take on and off because it's a one solid thing. It'll be easier for me. I realized this was a big motivation and learning from my time in Japan, is simplicity and perfection. It's so easy sometimes for me to overcomplicate solutions, or I think when I have a problem, actually this is something I learned in engineering school. When you're ideating solutions to a problem, it's very okay to come up with the most complicated and complex solutions that you think will work. And then throughout the process of simplifying or finalizing the design, ideally it gets simpler because the simpler a design is, the easier it is to construct, the quicker it is, the cheaper it is, and the less moving parts there are, the less opportunity there is for breakdowns and repairs, and there's less opportunities for things to break. So I applied that to this piece, simplified, and the final result was more perfect because everything was perfectly shaped and fit together and everything. So once that happened, basically the same day I went to Home Depot, got a sheet of plywood, had them cut it to size, brought it back, got to play with my new router, and made the perfect made the perfect cuts to create the composition that I wanted with the rings and the colors, which is super fun to use the router and to be perfectly precise, and it's so satisfying to watch the bit just like cut along in a perfect line at a perfect 45 degree. And then it came to painting time. I taped it, painted 2 coats on everything. 1 coat wasn't enough because it wasn't perfectly even, the paint. 2 coats was perfect because it evened out the color and let the wood grain still show through. And then after that, I went in and I touched it up by hand, the lines to be perfect. And then the piece was done. And the big reveal. And man, that was satisfying. Painted the edges. I also painted the back of the piece, fun fact, so that the whole piece of wood was sealed with the paint and the primer so that it would withstand humidity and changes to humidity more consistently here in humid South Florida. And I went to install it. The client loved it. People that have seen it have loved it, and it really does create a portal. A lot of people have said it looks like a portal at the end of the hallway that you want to just jump into. So there you have it. That's how I made the piece. Let me know if you enjoyed this type of video explaining how I made a piece. Comment below any questions you have, and be sure to check out my website, juliancastro.art. I have my available work there. I have other portals. I'm also available for other commissions, so if there's anything you like, let me know. Hit me up, swipe up, subscribe, get your merch. Boom.